Hello everybody, it's me again. I haven't been posting for a while, so it's about time I did another video. Last year got a little bit busy towards the end there, so I have made some changes in my life so that I can be posting a little more regularly, so need to get my act together here. I had a subscriber make the suggestion as to where was my episode on imperfect cadences. And I thought, you know what, that's a really good question, and I don't think I have one. I think I know the reason why I don't have one, but that's no excuse. I'll get into that a little bit, but I should still cover the topic and explain what it's all about. There's a little bit to it. So let's get into it and let's see what we can figure out. So the imperfect cadence, it implies from the name it's the opposite of the perfect cadence, and that's kind of true. Basically, the imperfect cadence, or sometimes you might hear the term half cadence, all of these terms are a little bit old and not so obvious in what they mean. Basically, it's where you move to the dominant chord. It's a cadence ending on the dominant chord. That's chord 5 of the key. So I'm here in C major, so that's GBD, the triad, the 5th chord of the key. And the imperfect cadence or half cadence is to move to the dominant chord via any of the main chords of the key. So 1 to 5, you can go from chord 1 to 5, you can go from chord 2 to 5, 4 to 5, or 6 to 5. And there's some issues and characteristics. So it's the idea of ending on chord 5. So a cadence describes the way a phrase ends, a musical phrase. Some phrases return to the tonic, whereas other phrases might move to the dominant because it's a midway phrase through a section of music. So this offers a variety of the way musical phrases can end by being able to end a phrase on the dominant. It's a strong enough contrast to the tonic chord, but it's also a strong, stable chord. So it's a way of ending on a strong chord within the key without having to return back to the tonic. The dominant chord is in a very strong relationship to the tonic, and this will help explain why it is chord 5. Now, the dominant chord is a perfect 5th away from the tonic, so it's the second most stable chord of the key without being the tonic. So, however, it's still not the tonic. So you can end a phrase on the dominant. It'll sound like a stable ending, but the listener will still be expecting more to come because it hasn't closed itself back to the tonic. So I hope that sort of makes sense why it's basically just a move to the dominant chord. Now what have we got? Well, we have 1 to 5, 2 to 5, 4 to 5, and 6 to 5 in our Roman numeral analysis of the chords within the key. Now, let me just address how to complete cadences. So, first of all, there's two main approaches. First of all, you can formularise cadences, and you can examine them, and you'll see here in this first one that I've used scale degrees, the degrees of the scale, that means the numbers of the notes in the scale, to describe all the parts of this cadence. And you could take these scale degrees and you could copy them into another key, and you could recreate this cadence perfectly. So that's one way, because this little formula shows you how we can move here from the tonic chord to the dominant chord. So there's a nice little formula there. We can also describe the various features in which we have, you'll notice, two voices stepping down. We've got the bass 1 to 5 because they're both root position chords. And it also has a note in common, and wherever possible, you want to try to exploit the note in common feature. So we can describe the cadence in that way. However, I do want to point out that cadences are 4-part harmony. And if you know how to do 4-part harmony, then you know how to complete cadences. You just need to understand what chords are in the cadence. Now, when you complete your 4-part harmony, you might be in a situation, well, you most likely will, you'll be in the situation where you have to end the first phrase and it's going to have to move to the dominant chord. And if you're completing your 4-part harmony, you're going to be completing an imperfect cadence at the end of the first phrase. So if you know how to complete 4-part harmony, you know how to do cadences, and you don't need to formularise this in the same way. And that is probably one of the reasons why I haven't really thought about doing a video on imperfect cadences. But, however, when you are asked to complete a cadence in a theory exam, you might have to identify one that's already written down, or they might give you a blank canvas. Cross your fingers that they give you a blank canvas, depending on what theory system you're doing an exam in. If they give you a blank canvas, it's pretty easy because you can just splat the cadence on there in the most familiar way you know how. So if you get a question, complete the imperfect cadence in G major, well, then you can formularise that pretty easily and splat your answer on there and move on. However, in your 4-part harmony, you'll need to know what you're doing. So I'm going to try and see if I can describe all of these features. We'll demonstrate having a go at one in another key, and then I will show you the way of how to do it just with 4-part harmony. All right, so I've looked at this first one. You can see here we have chord 1, C, E, G, spread here out across the voices, making sure we don't have more than an octave gap between the 3 upper voices. Here is the 3rd of the chord. It's also the 3rd note of the scale, but that's because it's chord 1. So we've got the 3 here. There's the 5th of the chord, and we've doubled the octave at the top there. Now, when you are doing an imperfect cadence, you'll notice you'll have 2 voices stepping down. It's exactly the opposite as when you have the perfect cadence, where you'd have the 2 voices stepping up. Here, you've got 2 voices stepping down, and there's a note in common, so you want to exploit that. And of course, the bass voice will easily go 1 to 5. So that's pretty straightforward. These 3 upper voices can be in any order you like. So that's really important when you're doing 4-part harmony, because you'll be given the melody and you're going to have to construct your cadence around the melody given. I might just demonstrate that really quickly down here. So let's imagine that we had let's imagine that this was our melody. Where did that go? Come back. Let's move this up here so we can just see all of our formulas there. Then things are a little bit rearranged. So let's put the bass voice in. Okay, now we've already got the note in common. So then I need the octave stepping down to the third of the next chord. So I could put that there, going there. And then here we have the third of chord 1 moving down to the fifth of chord 5. And if I get my voices. So there's the same cadence, but the parts have been rearranged because I had to do that because I was given the melody. But if I was just asked to draw the cadence with no reference to the melody, then I could just copy this and it'd be very easy. And I could learn how to do that, complete that, and learn to write that down. So good to practice writing it out in lots of different keys. Right, now, so that's 1 to 5. 2 to 5 also has a note in common. So 1 to 5 and 2 to 5 are the most common forms of imperfect cadence or half cadence because they have a note in common. So they're really good for voice leading, and that's why you'll find them to be more common. So we have a note in common. You'll notice we have, we've got the third of the chord and we've got the fifth of the chord, and they can both step up. So you can very easily formularise this. So you could make a thing here. Don't ask me why that's green. It just is, but no, that's all right. And hang on, I need another one. Okay, so you can see how you can create a formula here. So you can look through these ones I've written and write the scale degrees down, look at the elements, and you can recreate them in another key. So you see I could come down here and recreate this in another key pretty easily. I could be in the key of A major. Let's get rid of all that mess. So I'm in the key of A major, and I'm going chord 2 to 5. So let's see. Hang on, I need to do my 4-part here. All right, so I've got the 2. Well, actually, let's complete that. 2 going to 5. Okay. Then I could do my note in common, and the note in common for this one is, of course, the root note of chord 2. So you can make these links. Then you can see the fifth of the chord is, the third of the chord can step up to the root note of chord 5. And then the fifth of the chord can step up there. All right, so it's very easy to learn to recreate these. If, however, I was doing 4-part harmony, then I would have to work these out, and it may not be straightforward. That's why learning to do 4-part harmony is very important. So I'm sorry this is an elongated description and explanation, but look, on this channel, I like to try to give you the real story and the whole story so that we address all your questions. You just need to learn to scroll through all the boring bits of this video and get to the bits you need to know. Now, let's have a look. So that's 1 to 5, 2 to 5. Now, when we come to 4 to 5, these next two are a little bit tricky, and you have to be really careful because the two triads are adjacent to each other. So let's go back to C major for a second here. Back to C major, because that will make everybody happy. That's what I've learned in life. Right, so we're in C major. So if I draw chord 4 triad and chord 5 triad, you can see they're juxtaposed to each other. They have no notes in common. So because there's no notes in common, all the triad notes are just stepping up. So when you're going to harmonise 4 to 5, then you've got to be very careful because the risk of consecutive or parallel fifths or octaves is great. And you don't want to get caught doing that. So, how do we deal with that? And the answer is, contrary motion is the answer. Where are we? We want to have a look at what we've got here. So, the bass is going to go from the 4 to 5. And then basically, I've got the other voices stepping down. So using contrary motion against the bass. So the 5th of the chord steps down. The 3rd of the chord steps down. And the octave steps down a 3rd. So it's very easy to learn to create this, recreate this, right? The root notes of each chord step up. Then the 5th of chord 4 steps down, the 3rd of chord 4 steps down, and the doubled octave steps down a 3rd. It's very easy to formularise these. Or you could write the scale degrees and you could copy this really easily. So, as I say, if the question you have to answer is to be given a blank sheet of paper and here, write the cadence, write an imperfect cadence or half cadence. Very easy. You just splatter on in whatever way you've learned to write it out, and you can practice that and formularise it for yourself so that you can complete your exam. I hope that makes sense. Very like I've done here. You can look at its qualities and character, and you can learn to do it. By the way, you'll see the way I've written my chords out. I write them in this manner because you can see the root note on the bottom and stepping up in this manner because it's how we think about triads. It's how we think about chords. All right, now to come to here, the 6 to 5. Again, the AMB and other systems are going to tell you to double the 3rd for chord 6. It's the way they want you to do it. And that goes back to a tradition where the interrupted cadence, which I have done a video on, doubling the 3rd just helps create smooth voice leading. It comes across as being mandatory in these theory systems, and I can understand why. They're just trying to make things easy for students. If you were to look at actual 4-part harmony applied to historical music, like the chorales of Bach, yes, you'll often see Bach do that. His motivation for doubling the 3rd on chord 6, in fact, doubling the 3rd in other places too, was smooth voice leading. He wanted the parts to be able to move smoothly. Of course, you must understand, if you're looking at Bach chorales, which is, largely what 4-part harmony is based on, if we use Bach as the, defining character of 4-part harmony, you have to realize he is composing sophisticated art. So he's a composer with incredible thematic integrity. So a lot of the things that Bach does in his chorales are artistically very, very sophisticated, and he's controlling all sorts of themes and melodic shapes amongst his 4-part harmony. And so for the entry-level description of these things, we have to create formulas for people to understand. So I'm just trying to give you some explanations of why we do things. And you might see some contradictions if you're looking at examples of music. Okay, so with that said, you can formularise this really easily. 6 to 5, again, the 2 chords are adjacent to each other, so you have to be careful. There are no notes in common. All right, So in a cadence, if there is, you want to exploit that feature because it helps create contrary motion, as in the cases of 1 to 5 and 2 to 5. All right, so 6 to 5, very easy to formularize this. 2 voices go up and 2 go down. The doubled third, easy. 1 goes down, the other goes up. So you can formularize that really easily. The fifth of the chord is going to have to step up a third in order to double the root note of chord 5. Okay, so again, you can create a formula for that, and then you can practice recreating that formula in another key. Again, these 3 upper voices, in all of these cases, the 3 upper voices can be mixed up. You can mix up these parts because you can have more than a gap, more than an octave gap between the bass voice and the tenor, but you can't have more than an octave gap between the 3 upper parts. So be ready if you're going to identify a cadence. You need to be able to take into account that these 3 upper voices might be jumbled up for you. Okay, so that's one way to complete the question. So let me give you an example of a test question. Okay, so it might say imperfect cadence, and the key might be, let's G major. Let's pick a nice easy one. No one will get upset. Right, so you've been asked to write an imperfect cadence in G major. All right, start with the bass, 1 to 5. Okay. Note in common. Okay. Then the octave is going to be stepping down. So don't forget, 2 of the voices need to step down. And that just leaves then the third of the chord stepping down there. And whammo, it's completed. 1 to 5. Note in common. The octave is stepping down and the third of the chord steps down. All right. Now, I want to come down and complete one using 4-part harmony. All right. And now we're going to try and do it from a completely different point of view. So we've got, let's say we're completing a 4-part harmony. And I'm trying to think of a tricky question here. I'll stay in G major because I'm already in G major. So let's see. There we go. There's our melody. Okay. And I can complete this cadence just doing 4-part harmony. So I've decided here that it's an imperfect cadence. It's, hang on, what happened to that? That went a bit weird. 1, so it's going to be chord 1 to chord 5. All right, and I've decided at the end of this phrase it needs to be an imperfect cadence. I got 1 to 5. Now I can complete this. I can't formularize it as well. I might be able to notice the stepping down, and I might be able to relate that to the features that I learned about when I analysed this example with the 2 notes stepping down. So I might be able to pick up that thread, but you can do it using 4-part harmony. Now, again, we know 1 to 5. And where possible, try to use contrary motion between the outer voices. It can help. Now, that means, because we're harmonizing a melody, I've only got 2 more voices to use. Now I know 1 to 5, I can exploit the note in common. Oops, silly me. What am I doing? Here we are. All right, there's my note in common. But to do this as 4-part harmony, actually, let me get rid of that for a sec. Here's the process, right? I've got the melody there. I know what I'm doing, so I've put my bass line in, and I need to complete the other voices. Step 1, is the third of the chord there? Yes, it is. So don't add another one. So I need to double I need to double the root note or the fifth. So in this case, I'm going to double the root note of the chord, and I'm going to put the fifth in. Okay? So I'm doing this the 4-part harmony way. Wait, why are those stems both going that direction? There we go. All right, now look at this chord. Is the third of the chord there? And when I say the third of the chord, I mean the middle note of the triad. So we often say is the third of the chord there. I mean the middle note of the triad. So in C, E, G, E is the third of the chord. In G, B, D, B is the third of the chord, etc., etc. All right, so, and of course, you would write your chords out in this manner to help you. Always write the chords of the key out. And so now, is the third of the chord, so this is chord 5 in G major, so it's D, let me write it down for you, A, F sharp, and D. So they're the notes of chord 5. Now, is the third of the chord here? No, there's no F sharp. So let's put one in. Now, be sensible when you do this. Like, let's not put it down here because it's nowhere near where the other voices are happening. There's the third of the chord can fit in there nice and smoothly. Always looking for smooth. So you want notes to not move very far. And lo and behold, there's our 2 notes stepping down. Right? And then, of course, this will be the note in common, but you can double either the root note or the fifth. Now, imagine if I went down there. Then we would have to check for consecutives. Right? So watch this. We're going to check for parallel fifths, consecutive fifths. Some people use different terms. Watch this. Down a third, sorry, good grief. Down a second, right? So B to A, down a second, down a second, down a fourth, and up a fifth. Were any 2 of those the same? Yes. Down a second, but they are a third apart. G to B and F sharp to A, they're a third apart. So they are fine. Consecutive or parallel thirds is totally fine. Now, did you hear me say, and this is like if I put that D down there, you can see that this is consecutive fifths. So G to D, so went up a fifth, they both moved the same way, and they are a fifth apart. So that's parallel fifths or consecutive fifths, which we don't want. Now let me put that back up there. Now look at this, because it's really misleading. Down a fourth, up a fifth. Now, down the fourth is the inversion of up a fifth. So they're the same thing. It's like up a 5, right? Because if I took that A and moved it up an octave, I've got consecutive fifths. So always watch out for that. If you hear yourself saying down a fourth, up a fifth, or up a fifth, down a fourth, they are the inversion of each other, and you need to be having the warning lights going off. So G to D is a fifth apart, and D to A is a fifth apart. So this is wrong because I have parallel fifths. So this is where learning about the components of the cadence can really help. The two chords have a note in common, and even in 4-part harmony, if two chords have a note in common, you really do want to try to exploit that, because it's going to help. It's going to help your harmony. All right, and I'll just so that you can really see that point. And I know I've turned this into a very boring video, but it's really important to understand this, right? So you can see how they both have a D. And so you really want to capitalize on that, because it'll avoid consecutives for you, or parallel harmony, and just makes it easier to complete. All right, so learning how to do 4-part harmony will really help make cadences much easier, because you'll understand what's trying to be achieved. So for that reason, can I offer some advice? I actually teach people to do 4-part harmony before I really do an in-depth on how to complete cadences. Because to try to learn cadences before you learn to do 4-part harmony, I find that students just look at me and smile in the most vacant way possible. They're going, "What are you talking about?" And you can try to explain this till the cows come home, and students who have never learnt to do 4-part harmony find cadences really, really hard. I give my students a whole sheet on completing cadences, and they take one look at that and stare vacantly out the window. If they've learnt to do 4-part harmony, then trying to understand cadences is so much easier. So may I suggest, maybe don't get too stressed about cadences. Try to maybe look at learning 4-part harmony and how you go about that process and how to manage all the voices. And then when you come to review and understand cadences, it will be so much easier, because you will understand the terms of reference, and you'll just not be frightened of it. It'll just make sense to you. So, sorry for the boring video, but I've tried to deal with all these issues. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.